What's up everybody, my name is Peter, and in this video we're going to be discussing why the OnePlus 5 looks so much like the iPhone 7 Plus. And to be honest, in this video I'm going to be kind of the devil's advocate when I'm defending the OnePlus 5, because I'm going to give you my point of view as to why OnePlus did this. And my personal belief is that they didn't do this to make the phone look like the iPhone, but they did it to make it work like the iPhone. And you know, Apple had some things figured out earlier on that they applied to the design of their phones that OnePlus is just figuring out now. So I don't think they're doing it to look like the iPhone, but it's to make it work like the iPhone, from a technical point of view. So if you just first look at the iPhone 7 here to give a bit of perspective, laying on the table, if we overlay the picture that I just showed you of the OnePlus 5, we can see that they are pretty much identical. I mean, of course there are a few differences in the way that things are laid out, like, you know, there's some spacing here that is not there in the iPhone. But overall, it's pretty much the same with the round flash, the microphone in between the dual cameras, and the antenna band going over the entire assembly. I mean, it's just uncanny how much they look alike. But if we just first, I have this image from one of the teasers that OnePlus released on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and everything. If we increase the contrast, we can see that the camera assembly right here, we can see how it is in a relation to the rest of the phone. So if we just overlay that over the OnePlus 3, because we know the two phones are going to be kind of the same size because they're going to have the same size screen, and they're, you know, most likely also going to have the same size bezels. But if we overlay it here, we can see that if we look at the front of the phone, that the camera is actually going to be laid in the bezel of the phone and not on top of the display, which means that the camera bump is going to be smaller. Which, I mean, OnePlus has been talking quite a bit about making the phone thinner and more elegant, and I think the camera bump, even though the camera is centered on the OnePlus 3, the large camera bump is just pretty unsightly. It doesn't look good. It doesn't, you know, when you put it down on the table, it wobbles quite a bit. And of course, it's still gonna do that with this camera bump. It's, you know, still gonna wobble and it's still gonna not look too great. But I think that, you know, even if you just imagine this. The OnePlus 3 with official OnePlus cases needed kind of a lip around the camera on the case because the cases were actually thinner than the height of the camera bump. I think that is not going to be an issue anymore because the camera bump is so small. And also just in general, moving it up here gets it out of the way of the main board inside the phone. Because if you look at the OnePlus 3 here, actually let me just show you a picture here. So if we say OnePlus 3 inside, we can see that the, let me see, there. You can see that the camera is actually in the middle of the motherboard with the flash just below and the microphone above. I believe that's a microphone. Maybe, I think so. But here you can see over here you have some of the processors, and some over here you have some, I guess it's like the SIM card and some of the connection stuff over here. But they all need to connect over the camera or just under the flash. But if you need two cameras to be on the backside, you know, that's going to take up a lot of space, and you just really don't have the space for that. And then you have to make the battery smaller. Whereas if they just move the camera up into the corner, they're going to have, like, except for this part right here, they're going to have all this space for the motherboard. And it's just going to be a much more optimal way of doing things because the camera is so much out of the way and not in the middle of everything. So I believe that with this new design, even though the phone is going to be a little bit thinner than the OnePlus 3, I still believe that it is possible to have a battery of 3600 milliamp hours, which has been rumored quite a bit. And that brings me to another point, that is the thinness of the phone, or the shape of the phone. So the OnePlus 1 and OnePlus 2, and to a certain extent the OnePlus 3, had very curvy backs. Meaning that they felt, you know, very thin in your hand while still being quite roomy on the inside. But for the OnePlus 2, they just meant that the battery really didn't fit very well inside. So if we just look at, let's see, a good picture right here, you can see the battery doesn't extend all the way to the edges because the phone was simply too thin out there. And also the battery is completely flat, but the phone is rounded towards the middle, meaning that there is wasted space right above the battery. And if we look at the OnePlus 3 inside, I just have that over here, you can see that the battery actually goes all the way, pretty much all the way to the edge. But when they're going to make the new OnePlus 5, you can see that it's flat pretty much all the way across, and then only rounds towards the edges. I think it's a much better way to make the battery flat all the way across. And it's a way to optimize the battery size, because batteries, either they're completely cylindrical or they are square. So making the phone completely flat is just a better way of optimizing the size of the phone itself. Because people don't really seem to care about curved phones, or like the back of the phone being curved. They want thin phones, and if you want a thin phone, you have to make it completely flat. So I think that's why they're doing that, and I also think that's why OnePlus is touting the thinness of the phone, because they can fit a big battery in there, and they move the camera up here, and they can still make it thin. So as a quick disclaimer, I'm just gonna say that I'm not supporting OnePlus in making the phone so thin and making a camera bump in the process. Personally, I would prefer if they just filled out the space with a bigger battery, let's say 4000 mAh plus, and eliminated the camera hump. But I know that these days, you know, a selling point is the phone being thin, and it's kind of a first impression. And if they do manage to fit the 3600 mAh battery in there, you know, that's gonna be great, and I'm not gonna mind the camera bump for a thin phone with a big battery. So let's just see how it turns out. Now the antenna band's up here. That's the last point of discussion, and I will be honest, when I look at the backside of the OnePlus 3, you know, it just looks great. It looks gorgeous with the antenna bands just going straight over the back. You know, they're not curved, they're not anything weird, they're just lines, and they're not even afraid to stand out. You can see they're completely black on this model here. So they look great. Whereas on the new OnePlus 5, they kind of go towards the top of the phone, just like, you know, we see with the iPhone 7 here. And many people don't like that design, but I think when you think about this, Apple is like one of the biggest companies in the world, and they can manufacture anything the way they want it. But they have chosen to go with antenna bands going like this for a specific reason, and I believe that reason is that you get better reception. So just imagine when you lay this phone down on a table with the backside facing the table, most of these antenna bands are going to be covered by the table, or if you have it facing your leg when you have it in your pocket. Whereas if you have antenna bands like these, even if you lay it on the table, these are just going to be able to peek out and get a connection, which is going to make a big difference if you're in an area where the reception is not that good. And I think that is just why OnePlus adopted it. Now on this picture it doesn't really look like it extends to the edge, but if you look at the teaser image here, you can see that just above the camera is pretty much at the edge. I just think it's the way that the phone is curved towards the top that makes it look a little strange right here. So yeah, I think that is why the OnePlus 5 looks so much like the iPhone, because it just works better from a technical point of view. And you know, when you have to do these things the way that I just mentioned, with moving the dual cameras to the top, and you have to move them to this corner because that just works better, the antenna bands are more optimal in this position, and making the phone flat is just better for the battery. You know, then there aren't really that many ways you can do it. And of course you can, like the Google Pixel, make the entire phone kind of like wedge shaped, and you know, have the cameras behind a single piece of glass. But I think what OnePlus is doing here is just, you know, taking what works from other companies, which is, you know, what Apple has been doing, and learning from that, because Apple has been doing, you know, all glass phones for the iPhone 4, and they have tried some things with iPhone 5, and you know, they know how to make a phone look good and function. But with the bigger camera modules and the way that the, you know, all aluminum phones like the iPhone 6 and 7, you know, the antenna bands just work better like this. And I think OnePlus has figured that out with the OnePlus 5. Now, designing a phone like this, I believe, just makes more sense. If you guys disagree with me on any of these points, or if you know from a technical point of view how it works differently, feel free to comment down below and share your opinions, and I will try to look through most of them and also respond to as many as possible. So that's it for this time, guys. Thank you for watching, and well, let's see what the OnePlus 5 turns out to be. Bye.